I mean, I was the only blind kid in my schools after fourth grade. My parents didn't know any blind people. I didn't have any blind role models. When I was in high school, the chemistry teacher told me I couldn't take chemistry because it was a safety risk. And now I've met blind chemists and blind people who teach chemistry. And so I know I was not given the right information because they didn't have it. But now with the tools we have, the ability we have to connect with other people who have similar experiences, who've walked the road before us, join either formally or informally. Gather together in community.
Let's impact some men today. I think we're going to do a great job.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where we are here to connect men in pursuit of their potential. Now, before we jump into the episode, I first want to encourage you to join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sails. Do that by hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, and sharing this podcast with somebody else that you know can get value from it. And to the fellas that are watching or listening, I have a little bit of an extra ask for you. I'm going to ask that you check out the Noble Knights Men's Group. We're a group of men who share support, accountability, and mentorship in order to achieve our goals. And we want you to join us and be a part of a community of like-minded men on a mission to improve themselves and elevate their capacity for life. I'm excited because we're going to get some wind in our sails today from my guest, who is a globally recognized pioneer in disability inclusion and accessible innovation. A leader, a former CEO of both American Foundation for the Blind and the Lighthouse for the Blind. He now leads Innovative Impact LLC, supporting major organizations like Google, Microsoft, and others to enable disability inclusion into their culture and strategy. It is an honor and a pleasure to have on the podcast today, Dr. Kirk Adams out of Seattle. Dr. Adams, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. Now, I like to start the podcast by getting out of the way so the audience and the guests can get acquainted and chat for a moment. So I want to give you the podcast. And the first question I always ask the guest is, if you were to walk into a room and nobody knows who you are, what do you do? How do you introduce yourself?
Well, if I walk into a room, I will have a long white cane in my hand because that's how I travel safely and independently. And sometimes I walk into a room and it gets kind of quiet if the group of people who aren't used to interacting with people who are blind. So I will usually make first contact if there's not someone greeting at the door. And I will just turn to the nearest person and say, "Hi, I'm Kirk. Who am I talking to?" Oftentimes, in business settings, people have name tags on. I can't read your name tag, so I will often say, "Who am I talking to?" And then I would probably say, I'm Kirk. I live in Seattle. I have a consulting practice where I help companies supercharge their bottom line through disability inclusion. I have a PhD in leadership and change. I've led a couple major organizations, and I'm really excited to be here and to find out what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Nice. That's fantastic. And I imagine that opens up the door for great conversation and probably some follow-up questions from the person you're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. So the heroic, unique identity, sometimes if I expand, I say I was the CEO of the American Foundation for the Blind, which is Helen Keller's organization. And when I first moved from Seattle to New York, and we're in the offices there in Manhattan, if I needed a little shot of motivation, I could walk down the hall and sit at Helen Keller's desk and
nice.
Play with her typewriter and feel the vibe.
I hear that. You mentioned shot of motivation, and my follow-up question was going to be walking into a room and saying, "Who am I speaking to?" Or you jokingly said, I make first contact. What has given you the confidence and really just the air, which I can honestly say I feel here on the call, There's a presence about you, Kirk. What do you credit that presence to, that confidence to, in order to walk into a room and state who you are so clearly and confidently?
Well, I think two dynamics. So first of all, my retinas detached, both of them, when I was 5. I was in kindergarten, and I was a sighted little kid one day, and 2 days later I was a blind little kid. And my parents, who were in their mid-20s, had never met a blind person before. I woke up in the hospital and couldn't see. And they were told, Kirk can't come back to the neighborhood school. He's got to go to the school for the blind kids. And they visited the Washington State School. We were living north of Seattle. They weren't impressed. They visited the Oregon State School. They were impressed, so they quit their jobs, moved the family down there so I could go to school there. And I went there for first, second, and third grade. And, there was no question. I was totally blind, so I needed to learn Braille. I needed to learn how to use a cane. I needed to learn how to type on a typewriter so I could go to public school when I was ready. And I did that in fourth grade. But at the school, I got 3 things. I got really great skills. So I got the blindness skills that I use daily, read and write Braille, use the cane. And I got the gift of high expectations. A lot of kids with disabilities, again, maybe their families don't have any experience. There's some assumptions made about their capabilities and what their life is going to look like. And sometimes they are faced with low expectations from their school, from their family, from their community, and those can become internalized. But my parents were teachers. My dad was a high school basketball coach. They didn't want to see anything less than an A on a report card. They expected their kids to be in athletics. The school I was at, 120 blind kids. If blindness was your only disability, you were expected to be at grade level. So I was given that gift. And the other gift I was given was the development of a strong internal locus of control, or a strong sense of agency, where I just believed in my bones as an 8-year-old blind kid that I could do what I set my mind to. If there was a problem, I could figure it out. I could create my own path. And they instilled that in us really intentionally. They had us backpacking in the Three Sisters Wilderness area and up on Mount Hood, making snow forts out of giant snowballs, and scrambling around in the tide pools on the Oregon coast, and out on the playground skinning our knees and climbing trees and doing all the things little kids do. So yeah, I was given those 3 things, and unfortunately not all young people with disabilities are given those things. And then secondly is just developmentally, the way we develop strengths. If I'm a researcher, so if you read the book The Talent Code, it talks about the way people develop strengths is by overcoming challenges, increasingly difficult ones. So if you're going to be a chess champion or a concert musician or an Olympic athlete, you're going to be given those challenges in a very intentional, orderly way so you can develop those strengths. But as you go through this life as a person with a significant disability, you are facing increasingly difficult challenges. Elementary school, middle school, high school, college if you go there, relationships, jobs. And since the world wasn't designed for people with impairments, not surprisingly, because the majority of people don't have them, we have to face challenges constantly and do creative problem solving constantly and stay super organized and super intentional in order to thrive. And that's what I'm interested in, is helping people be in those conditions where they can thrive.
Yeah, I feel as though it's what we focus to, we gravitate towards, and it's the car out of control. They say, don't look in the ditch or else you're going to steer in the ditch. Look at the road and steer towards the roadway. And I love that you mentioned those gifts, the skills, the high expectations, that deep rooted belief in self, and that agency, that self agency, which I'll be honest and forgive my candidness. I would say there are a lot of folks and some guys listening who have not received those gifts, and they are holding themselves back from operating at their fullest potential because they haven't given themselves the permission to, which is why I started with that question, because I love the confidence of who am I speaking to, and then taking your work into consulting. helping others skyrocket their profits by adding that inclusivity and the accessibility into their strategies. I'm curious, as you mentioned, 5 years old, becoming blind, but still growing up with the high standards. What has growing up blind taught you about leadership and inclusion?
It's taught me that human beings are super resilient and super smart and super adaptable and can achieve amazing things on the regular. The people I've encountered along the way who had a much more difficult pathway than I, and have managed to thrive. It's also taught me that there's a variety of there's many roads you can follow to get where you want to go, and there's many ways you can do it. There's not a formula. Every person has a unique set of characteristics. No two of us are alike. We all see things differently, perceive things differently. We need to approach things differently, given our nature and our nurture. So I'm very open-minded as far as how people move forward to thrive according to their very individual own definition of what thriving is.
Yeah. As you continue to get older and you go through middle school, high school, and eventually college to the real world, right? Acquiring your PhD, where did the decision, or maybe the idea, the inception, the desire to lead major institutions come into? I imagine it's not something you just wake up one day and like, I'm going to lead major institutions.
Yeah.
But I'm curious as to how that trickle effect came about and how we ended up there.
Well, first of all, I don't want to make it seem like it was all planned and intentional and smooth sailing. You know, the teenage years were very challenging. I grew up in small towns in the Pacific Northwest, and when people turned 16, they got two things: they got a driver's license and they got a job, some minimum wage something, and they all got driver's licenses, and I got neither. So I was pretty isolated and pretty sad about that, pretty frustrated, pretty angry, 16, 17, 18 years old. And then I was given a scholarship to a small college, Whitman College in Walla Walla, and everyone was in the same boat. Hardly anyone had a car. Everyone stayed on campus. We were hours away from a big city, so everyone stayed there. It was easy for me to navigate, and so things got much better. And then it came time to go to work. I graduated cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, and got into some graduate schools, but thought, I really want to work and make some money and marry this girl who will be married 40 years in September, and have some kids and buy a house. And so I set out looking for a job and started applying for things in kind of financial analysis, financial analyst spaces. And I would send my cover letter and my resume, and I'd get a phone interview, and I'd go, great. And then they'd say, come in for the in-person interview. I'd walk in with my long white cane and my slate and stylus so I could take some notes in Braille. And, the confusion would set in across the desk as the person, not surprisingly, had probably never worked with a blind person, didn't know our capabilities, didn't know the tools and techniques we use. And so I was the runner-up many, many times. And then I started disclosing in my cover letter, I've been blind since age 5. This is how I've done what I've done. This is how I'll do this job. And then I wasn't even getting the phone interviews. So I had a very frustrating experience, as so many of us do. Only 35% of us with significant disabilities are in the workforce. So there's a lot of poverty and a lot of the bad things that go with poverty. But my resume landed on the desk of a sales manager for a small securities firm. He'd also gone to Whitman, was also an econ major, like 15 years before me. he called up some of the professors and said, this Kirk Adams, could he sell tax-free municipal bonds over the phone? And they said, sure he could. So that's the opportunity I was given. So for 10 years, I sold securities, straight commission, 50 cold calls a day, every day, which builds strong character. And I did earn now that I look back on it, I did quite well for a kid in his 20s, and did buy the house, which I'm sitting in now, and did marry the young lady, and did have the kids, and did all those things. But then I didn't like it. I didn't really enjoy it. It was the job I could get. And when I turned 30, I'd done well enough that I could take a pause and decide what I wanted to do next. So I actually got the What Color Is Your Parachute book out of the Talking Book and Braille library. And I made an arrangement with another broker to take over my client book. And that gave me enough money to live frugally for a year. But I went through the whole What Color Is Your Parachute process and got very clear that I should be in the nonprofit sector, I should be in leadership, and I should devote myself to creating opportunities for other people with disabilities to make their pathways as easy and fruitful as possible. The book tells you to do informational interviews who are doing what you want to do. So I called up some organizations that I gave donations to and respected, and was talking to the president of a local organization, and she said, well, I was a securities broker and I decided to pivot to the nonprofit sector, and I think you should do that by becoming a professional fundraiser, because you've talked to wealthy people about financial stuff for the last 10 years, and there's a crying need for professional development people. And so I said, yes, I'll do that. So I started applying for fundraising jobs, not getting them because I didn't have any experience. And then I got a letter from the State Talking Book and Braille Library saying they needed to raise $200,000 or close a program. So I called the librarian and told her my story, and said, how about I come down and volunteer 20 hours a week and raise you your $200,000 and job hunt the rest of the time, and that will give me some experience and something on my resume. So that's what I did. And I got a book on tape from Reading for the Blind and Dyslexic about how to write a grant proposal, and sent out some letters of inquiry and was invited to submit some proposals, and had some beginner's luck and got some big checks. And they created a job for me, asked if I would stay on and continue to do that. So my first nonprofit job was as a development officer for the Seattle Public Library Foundation, raising money for the Talking Book and Braille Library. I went back to school, got a master's degree in not-for-profit leadership, and I just became more and more clear that leadership was the best lever I could bring to bear on really significantly shifting the landscape for as many people as possible. And I pursued that. Went to the Lighthouse for the Blind to start their foundation and their foundation board and their fundraising program. And 5 years in, the leader there, the CEO there, called me into his office and said, he was cited. He said, I've been here 20 plus years, and there really needs to be a blind person leading this organization, since it is the Lighthouse for the Blind. Would you like to do what it would take to be qualified? Because we'll be hired 3 years from now. I'm going to retire. We're going to hire a search firm. Would you like to be the leading candidate? And I said I would. And much to their credit, they hired a consultant to do an analysis with me of my knowledge, skills, and abilities balanced against those that would be necessary. And wherever there was a gap, we put in a development plan. And we took about 18 months and implemented the plan. An example, the Lighthouse employs blind and deafblind people in businesses, including aerospace manufacturing. So there's about 120 blind and deafblind machinists making parts for all the Boeing aircraft. And
Nice.
I didn't know the aerospace industry, so I needed to learn supply chain and ISO standards for aerospace and sit in on the Boeing contract negotiations and learn that. So
Yeah.
that's one example of the many things I needed to learn. But went through that process. They did hire the search firm. They did a national search. They gave me that opportunity.
That's fantastic. That is
Yeah.
amazing. And I wanted to say really quick, Dr. Adams, you are a problem solver. And I want that message to drive home for anybody that's listening or watching. The fact of the matter is, there are no obstacles in your life. All I hear as you walk through the steps, you're like, okay, what needs to be done? What I need to acquire, learn, or who do I need to talk to get to that next step? And it's absolutely amazing because we can all learn from that. And something that I wanted to really ask before we continue,
Yeah.
I didn't want to gloss over when you mentioned sitting down in the interviews, you walk in with your white cane and they're not familiar with some of the skills and the tools that you use. I do believe when it comes to leadership, information allows the leader to be discerning, and they can make better decisions. I would love for you to share what are some of the strategies, tactics, and the tools that the blind use that some of our entrepreneurs and leaders that are listening right now might not be aware of, but they might have the perfect candidate sitting on their inbox right now.
Yeah. So technology is embedded and baked into basically any job anyone would pursue these days. So technology is paramount. You have to have technology skills, and that means using adaptive technology or assistive technology. So the iPhone is the best example. Anyone listening who has an iPhone, go to settings, go to accessibility, and turn voiceover on. And then you can swipe and tap and use rotor motions on your phone, and it will speak to you everything that's on the screen and allow you to operate the computer in your pocket. And that's built into every Apple product. Thank you, Apple. There is specialized screen reading software that I use on my laptop here. It's called Job Access with Speech is the one I use, and can't use a mouse, so everything's keystrokes. There's like 300 keystrokes you have to learn, but human beings can learn anything. So I can navigate in the computerized environment, and it does two things. There's a voice synthesizer that will read it to me out loud, what's on the screen. And there's tools within JAWS. You do keystrokes that'll grab all the links off of a web page and put them in a column alphabetically so you can find the links. You hit H, it'll take you to the next heading. There's all kinds of navigation tools. And it also drives a refreshable Braille display. So I have a Braille display on my desk that shows me one line at a time what's on the computer screen, and as you toggle down, the pins that show the Braille reconfigure for each line. AI, really helpful. Meta Ray-Ban glasses out now that can AI give you image descriptions. There is a service called Ira where I can call up a trained agent on my iPhone. They can look through my phone camera and give me sighted assistance. Super handy at airports. You get dropped off at O'Hare at the right door for Alaska Air, and you step in, and where's the counter? So I call up Ira. They can pinpoint where I am. They pull up the airport map, and they say, turn 10 degrees to your right, walk about 20 steps. Okay, angle left 15 degrees, walk 5 steps. You're in line at the Alaska counter. GPS, indoor navigation systems with beacons. There's just all kinds of technology that can allow us to operate as efficiently in the environment as anyone else. And I do want to make a distinction between an impairment and a disability. So I'm visually impaired. I cannot see, but I'm not always in a disabling situation because of that. So my simple example I use, because I've run a lot of board meetings, is if I'm at the head of the conference table and I have my agenda and my financials and my committee reports in Braille, I can operate that meeting as well as a sighted person could run it. But if I walk in and you hand me a stack of print that I cannot read, my impairment and the environment don't mesh, and it's put me in a disabling situation. So we have digital, built, and social environments, and my mission in life is to create the best optimal fits between people with impairments and the workplace that I can, so people can bring their whole selves to work and really contribute to the mission of their organization they're working for.
If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Phaeton here, host of the Modern Man Podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind Group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals. Check out themodernmanpodcast.com. That's fantastic. What has your experience in as you went through the training, you closed up some of those gaps to then become the leader of Lighthouse for the Blind? What has that experience taught you about the innovation and now the inclusion that you consult on for other companies? What did that teach you as you took on that role?
Well, it taught me a couple things. It taught me that there is a huge disconnect between an untapped, uniquely talented pool of people who are eager to work and companies who are having some challenges recruiting, retaining the top talent. And we talked before about the strengths people with disabilities develop, and those are the exact same strengths employers say they need and want. So to have those conversations with employers about the possibilities of really transforming their organization by being intentionally inclusive of people with disabilities, and then showing them how to do it. So there's really good data, not a lot, but really good data, that if a organization, a work group, a department has 20% or more of their employees are disclosed as people with disabilities, there's lots of really good things that happen. Absenteeism is down, retention is up, better safety records because everyone follows the safety rules, better morale, better customer perception. So then there are in order to make anything really transformational happen, you need to align government, corporate, nonprofit, and community, and there are stakeholders in all of those groups that want better outcomes for employment for people with disabilities, but they're really not working together very well. We have a vocational rehabilitation system in our country that we fund as taxpayers that has a multi-billion-dollar budget. Their job is to help people with disabilities get employed. Less than 10% of the companies who say they want to hire people with disabilities are working with the vocational rehabilitation system. So I have a model where I use ethnographic research, which is what I know how to do, and I interview the leaders of a company and really find out where they're at and where they want to go. And then I make a set of recommendations, and they largely involve bringing the right people from these various stakeholder groups together to in common see what each of them can bring to the table to accomplish that goal that all of them have, but they're not really working together to accomplish.
You mentioned consulting these big tech brands, and really one of the major parts is getting the right people in the room, getting the right people together to work together. What are some ways any business owners listening or any companies that might hear this podcast can do a better job at tapping into this pool of workers who are skilled, who are ready, and probably and most likely could exceed the expectations that they've put on the job application? What could we do better?
Well, there's a bit of a playbook. So the first easiest thing to do is to find out what the vocational rehabilitation agency in your state is. So every state has them. 30 states have two, one for people who are blind, one with people with other disabilities. 20 states have one that serves everyone with disabilities. And they have vocational rehabilitation counselors that have people they work with that each have an individual plan for employment. They have received training. They have their resumes. And if you should find one of those folks to be the right person to hire, vocational rehabilitation can pay for any specialized equipment, specialized software. They can come in and do an assessment of your workplace and recommend the equipment and adaptations you should have. They can pay for that. They can pay for salaries during an on-the-job training period. They can do lots and lots of things, and most employers aren't taking advantage of that. And they'll be so happy that you called. So it's very interesting. There's a research study where the researchers asked the vocational rehabilitation counselors, what's the greatest barrier to successful employment of disabilities? And they asked the employers the same question. And the vocational rehabilitation counselor said employer attitudes. And the employer said lack of their knowledge of our operational needs. So again, there's a disconnect there. The next thing to do is look for other companies who've already done it. I'd say take a quick look at disabilityin.org. It was started by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in the early 2000s. 500 companies that have made formal commitments to including people with disabilities in their workforce, in the design and marketing of their products and services, and in their supply chain. So doing business with disability-owned business. So go to disabilityin.org and click on the corporate partners list and look at the names of those 500 companies. And they all have leaders in the disability inclusion space that also would be happy to hear from you. And then thirdly, find your community-based nonprofits that work with people with disabilities. Just use a search engine and put in the name of your town or your county or your state and put in nonprofit and put in disabilities and see who comes up. And again, they will be really happy to hear from you.
Yeah. It's amazing that all these opportunities and these resources are at our fingertips. Yet if we don't know about them, right, we never use them. And if we never use them, we never get the benefits of what these resources would provide. Right. Your dissertation, when you got your PhD, highlighted how blind professionals succeed in corporate settings, which ties into the experience to leadership and building support systems. And you mentioned surging companies' bottom lines. I'd love to get to that nitty gritty. How does the company's bottom line surge through what you've seen with the success of blind professionals?
In a couple of significant ways. One, the metrics that I mentioned before. There's less turnover, which is a cost savings. You don't have to recruit and train as many people. There's lower absenteeism, so your productivity is better. There's better safety records, so you don't have the costs of safety incidents. Employee satisfaction is higher. Customer perception is better. If you have a lot of people with disabilities in your organization, you're much more likely to have your products and services be accessible for people with disabilities, especially online, e-commerce. There's a lot of data that shows that people with disabilities will abandon that shopping cart if they run into problems using the screen reading software. There are internationally accepted standards, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. If you follow those, then people will be able to buy your products and services with ease online. So it expands your reach to customers. Having people with disabilities in your workforce spurs innovation, creativity, communication. And again, if you get significant numbers, then there's a really positive culture transformation that happens where the organization has a culture of active mutual support, of empathy, of bringing in folks with all different types of skill sets and blending them together. It just makes us a stronger organization. As far as my dissertation goes, I interviewed blind people who said they were successfully employed, and found out the factors that led to their success. And it's not surprising, the blindness skills that I talked about, having the technology skills, the basic knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job well, supportive family. A lot of people talked about being on a team, like a sports team or in a choir or debate team when they were young. And then everyone had some sort of experience or experiences that gave them that strong internal locus of control, that sense they could really do whatever they set their minds to. One example, there was a woman who'd been 45 years in the telecom industry, about to retire. I interviewed, and she remembered when she and her sister were twins. Her sister was sighted, and when they were 10, their parents sent them on the bus out of New York City to summer camp. And when they got to the point to ride the horses, the counselors told the blind young girl that, well, that's a safety issue. You can't ride the horses. And so she sat there while the other kids did it. And that night, she and her sister snuck out of the cabin and went to the stable and got out a couple of horses. And she says she just remembers riding through the night with her sister, and the freedom and the sense of exhilaration and power. Another young boy said when he was 12, he was blind. He lived in a neighborhood. All the young kids his age were doing bicycle tricks, like jumping ramps and pedaling and standing up on the seat. And he did it as a blind kid. He ended up in the emergency room more than once, but that's what gave him the sense of agency, where he became got a master's degree in computer science and a law degree. So the other thing, though, is everyone had expressed disappointment. Everyone had a pretty strong level of disappointment that it was still there were still struggles, that not everything was accessible, that their employer might decide to change a system without considering whether they could access it or not. So walk in one day and you can't do your job anymore. Disappointment that they were the only person who'd made it that far on the org chart. Disappointment that people were hired after them who were less skilled were promoted beyond them. Disappointment they didn't see anyone with disability in the C-suite. So it was super enlightening work I did in interviewing some really amazing people.
What is something you wish more managers, leaders, business owners would know in order to do better? Right, we can reach out to our nonprofits, reach out to our local vocational rehabilitation station, but even doing all that, what do you wish we would know more?
I think it's familiarity and proximity and understanding and knowledge. Again, not everyone has interactions with people with disabilities, especially in a professional setting. But I just recommend people just take a few minutes and think, what is an impairment or a disability that might resonate with you? Do you have someone visually impaired or with a hearing impairment in your family? Did you go to school with a kid in a wheelchair? Does one of your relatives have a multiple sclerosis diagnosis? Did you see something in a movie that struck you? And think about that. What might be personally resonant with you, and then type it into a search engine. Put Hoboken, New Jersey Multiple Sclerosis Association, and something will come up, and there will be a group. There'll be an organization. At the very least, go to their website and sign up for their newsletter. They'll have events. If they have a facility, they'll have tours. Increase your knowledge and your understanding at a human being to human being level by interacting with fellow human beings who happen to have a characteristic of an impairment. So another thing I do when I'm talking to a live audience, I often say, who in here is 5'2" or shorter? Clap. And there's always somebody. And I say, if you walk into a room and there's a package you need and it's on a shelf that's 8 feet off the ground, your characteristic of your height has put you in a disabling situation. So you're going to need to get a tool like a step stool.
Yeah.
Or you're going to need to create a team. You're going to have to find a tall friend. And then you might want to build a lower shelf. So you might want to change your environment, make an accommodation. And that's all it is. We have very different characteristics that necessitate us interacting with the world in different ways, and just to understand that at a heart to heart, human to human level, I think it would be the best key that I could turn.
Yeah. All about the relationships and meeting the people and bridging that gap. And I don't mean to alarm you or surprise you 38 minutes into the episode, Dr. Adams, but I am Black. So I say that as a joke, but
well, I will tell you, I've been married to an African American woman for 39 years, so I caught that vibe.
Yeah, nice.
My two children identify as African American, so we have a very intersectional household here.
That's what I'm talking about. Dr. Adams, you're coming to the cookout. And
right.
But I mentioned that because I love the example you gave about the height, because whether it's Black, whether it's short, tall, blind, what have you, there are lots of situations that might put us in a disabled situation. When my daughter was born and she was crying at 3:00 in the morning because she's hungry, I was disabled when it came to feed her. I did not have the proper tools. So what I used was the little index finger to poke my wife and make sure she's up and able to do it. But to your point, and that's why I mentioned beforehand, you are a problem solver, because the skills, the internal sense of agency, and really just the confidence within self, the high standards. I think anybody listening, regardless of your situation or reality, this is foundational and truthful to us living our best lives, regardless of what cards life has given us and dealt us. It's time to play them, and it's time to go all in, because we only have one round at this, right?
Yeah, and
cards on the table.
You don't have to do it alone.
Yes.
I mean, I was the only blind kid in my schools after 4th grade. My parents didn't know any blind people. I didn't have any blind role models. And when I was in high school, the chemistry teacher told me I couldn't take chemistry because it was a safety risk. And now I've met blind chemists and blind people who teach chemistry, and so I know I was not given the right information because they didn't have it. But now with the tools we have, the ability we have to connect with other people who have similar experiences, who've walked the road before us, join either formally or informally. Gather together in community.
I love that. Just a couple of last questions here as we come up on our time, Dr. Adams. Yeah. One question is, what is it you hope your work echoes into the world? What is it that you hope the outcome of the work you're doing becomes as a legacy?
Well, the vision would be that the outcomes for people with disabilities are the same as the general population. So only 35% of us are working. Of the working age population, and the general population, it's 70%. If the unemployment rate for the general population is 4%, ours is 8%. So our outcomes are always half as good or twice as bad. So ultimately, it would be to have those outcomes be the same, so everyone's on a level playing field. I don't believe that'll happen in my lifetime, but I would like to make a significant contribution to making that happen.
I love that. And I would say this: the virtuous mission is the mission you commit your life to, knowing you won't see the fruits of that labor within your lifetime. It's the man that plants the tree for someone else to sit in the shade. And that's what you're doing for the world. So I commend you, and I thank you for the work that you're doing. And I hope that this podcast and the information you've shared has inspired some of our business owners and hires, the hiring managers that listen to this podcast, to seek out the pool of workers who are ready, able, and equipped to succeed in the positions that are open, and if they need help doing so, if they need consultation doing so. I know they're going to have to stand in line behind the likes of Apple, Google, and, and Microsoft, but what are some of the best contacts, ways for folks to connect with you,
LinkedIn,
learn more of what you're doing?
Kirk Adams, PhD on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn every day. And then I have a website. It's drkirkadams.com, drkirkadams.com. I've got a newsletter and a YouTube channel and all the things. And my definition of a leader is anyone who's willing to help right now. So if anyone wants to talk about this and move forward and just even thinking about being more inclusive of people with disabilities, I am ready, willing, and able to talk to anyone anytime about this.
And I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. And the last question, I say, is usually the hardest and the heaviest. And if it's something we touched on and discussed already, it's fine. But no, I think you're going to do fantastic, Dr. Adams. It's simple. It's simply what has happened in your life or something you've experienced that shapes the way you view the world as a man.
Oh my gosh, becoming a father. I mean, holding our 2 infant children as soon as they were born. That would be the most transformational thing that's happened to me. And I dreamed of having a family, having children. So that's the most transformational, and a very, very, very much in that same ballpark as now have a 3-year-old grandson and a 1-year-old granddaughter who live a mile away. And they are awesome. And Evan, who's 3, he knows if he wants Grandpa to read him the story, he's got to get one of the books that has Braille in it.
Nice.
And Hallie, the 1-year-old, knows if she wants my attention, she's got to touch me. She's got to come up and she grabs on my pant leg and tugs if she wants my attention. So
what do they call you? They call you Grandpa, or do they have a name?
Grandpa Kirk.
I love that, Grandpa Kirk, and I will have you.
Kirk and Grandma Roz. I'm not quite as popular as Grandma Roz, but I'm working on it.
We'll get there. I feel like that's going to be in the 5 to 7 range when they're a little more devious, right?
That's right.
How have you changed from before fatherhood to after fatherhood?
Well, I became a father when I was 25. And I think that is what really set me on the path of considering a legacy. I was in the securities business. I was making good money. My wife worked at the Nordstrom headquarters store. We lived downtown in a high rise. We were having a really wonderful time, as people in their 20s probably should do. But then when the first baby came, it took me a while to get to the point where I got clear that I needed to do something really significant and meaningful with my life. So I think that was probably the beginning of that process of really getting clarity on my purpose.
Yeah, well, we are one and the same in that feeling, and that's what I'm doing here with this podcast. This is the mission of the legacy and the vision that I'm pushing forward. So thank you for the time and the expertise. Globally recognized. It did, right? Just like that. I did tell you it would go by quick, and we ended up going a lot more than 30 minutes. We're pushing 45 minutes at this point, but globally recognized pioneer in disability inclusion and accessible innovation, leader, former CEO of both American Foundation for the Blind and the Lighthouse for the Blind, Dr. Kirk Adams, out of Seattle, Washington. Thank you for being on the call with us today and sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and your experience.
An absolute pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure over here. I am going to really quick share a couple of gems that you left along the way, because I do take notes. And the skills, the skills, the high sense of agency, and the high expectations. Notice that there are no requirements to have these things. Anybody that's listening, you can acquire the skills. You could have the sense of agency, and of course, the deep-rooted belief in self, in accomplishing anything that you set yourself out to do. The Talent Code, a book you might want to consider reading. Another book that was mentioned was What Color is Your Parachute? It's actually a book I have not heard of, but something you might want to explore, especially if it talks about interviewing those who are doing what you want to do with your life. To the business owners, the hiring managers, 35% of disabled population is in the workforce, which means you have a huge pool of highly skilled workers who are waiting and ready to work. Adaptive technology. And I say adaptive technology, I take out the technology aspect. How many things in our life, whether it's AI, whether it's our phone, whether it's the things around us, have been adapted to the world that we now live in? That adaptability, when applied in the proper way, can allow so much more productivity and output in your workforce and support those who are working for you. Building more of a culture of inclusivity, empathy, and also having a higher morale at your work environment will increase your revenue and output. And if you are looking for becoming more accessible yourself, be sure to reach out to your local vocational rehabilitation station and go to disabilityin.org to learn more. And you have the links to Dr. Kirk Adams right there in the show notes or in the description below. I'm going to say thank you yet again, but ask that you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button to get a new episode each and every single week. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend that you know can get value from it as well, and leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing. It's the best compliment that you can give us. And as we always say at the end of the episode, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.